Not everybody always knows. Not long ago, I was coming back from China, and Chicago was the first port of entry, and I was there getting undressed for the security people, and I put my stuff on the conveyor belt ahead of me, and the lady ahead of me said, "So where'd you get all those screw-top bottles? My bottles all leak." And I said, "Well, I got them at the Container Store." And then I was going through the magnetometer, and the TSA guard looked at me and said, "Oh my God, it's you." I'm from Bosnia, and we all love you in Bosnia, and if it weren't for you, there wouldn't be a Bosnia, and you're always welcome in Bosnia. Then he said, "Can I have my picture taken with you?" So he got the other TSA guard, and we had our picture taken. And then I went back to get my stuff, and the lady of the screw-top bottle said, "So what exactly happened here?" And I said, "Well, I used to be Secretary of State." And she said, "Of Bosnia?" So thank you for letting people know. I am really, really grateful to Lanny and Sharon Martin for being my friends and for sponsoring all this, and so very, very kind of you to do this, and this wonderful art museum, and Christoph, I really think you did a fabulous job of mounting this, and then Scott for Northwestern Mutual's sponsorship and the Macy Foundation, and then I also want to thank Martin Fuller, a very good friend of mine. He's here with his family. He spent a lot of time at my house as we assembled the pins and appraised the pins and decided what they really meant, so it's very nice to have you here with me. I love being in Denver, and I do consider it my hometown. I lived in many places. You'll find this hard to believe. I lived at 13th of Bannock, which is under something at the moment. And nobody would have lived in downtown. And I've lived in South Denver. I did go to Maury, and I went to Kent, which I loved. One of my classmates, Julika. Good to see you. There were only 16 of us. And I love coming back. I have come back many times, obviously in the summers and skiing, and then when the convention was here, which Denver did its very best. I thought that was a fabulous convention. So I'm really thrilled to be here, and this is my hometown, and to have the show here in my hometown is the best. So let me tell you how it all started. The whole thing would never have happened if it hadn't been for Saddam Hussein. I was sent to the United Nations in February '93, and it was right after the Gulf War. And the ceasefire had been translated into a series of 6 sanctions resolutions that had to be renewed all the time. And I was an instructed ambassador, and my instructions were to make sure that those sanctions resolutions stayed on, and therefore I said perfectly terrible things about Saddam Hussein constantly, which he deserved. He'd invaded Kuwait. So after a while, a poem appeared in the papers in Baghdad, and comparing me to many things, but among them, an unparalleled serpent. I happened to have a snake pin, so I wore it when we were doing Iraq. And I think that you've all noticed what happens after the ambassadors at the UN meet in the room. You go out and the press is there, and all of a sudden some camera zeroed in on the snake pin and said, "Why are you wearing that snake pin?" And I said, "Because I was compared to an unparalleled serpent." And then I thought, well, this is fun. So I went out and bought a lot of costume jewelry that, in fact, I thought would depict whatever it is we were going to do on any given day. So on good days, I wore flowers and butterflies and balloons, and on bad days, horrible insects and various carnivorous animals. And what would happen when the other ambassadors asked me, "What are we going to do today?" I said, "Read my pins." And it was based on, if you remember, the first President Bush had said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." So I was read my pins. And it developed to such a whole process where people actually did look at my pins and try to figure out what we were going to do. I do have a lot of pins in the collection. They all have some kind of a foreign policy story associated with it. It is true, I did start an international relations club at Kent and made myself president of it. And every time I went to a different school, I did the same thing. The only reason that I ended up being ambassador to the United Nations was that when I was a sophomore in high school, I won the United Nations contest for the Rocky Mountain Empire. because I was able to name the 51 countries of the UN in alphabetical order. But international relations has been my passion, and foreign policy has, and I think that I felt it was very important to make foreign policy less boring. And so the pins are basically a vehicle for telling foreign policy stories. That's what it's all about. There's some, let me just point out, that they all have placards on them that are kind of interesting to look at. There is a bluebird that is really very beautiful, and one of the things that I had to do when I was ambassador at the United Nations, the Cubans had shot down unarmed civilian planes. And my job was to get condemnation of Cuba. And what had happened was that the government sent me the transcript of what the Cuban pilots were telling each other as they were chasing the unarmed planes over international waters. And it was all translated except for one word. And they kept saying, this is what they were saying: we have cojones, they don't have cojones, we're going to shoot their cojones. So I was quite appalled at the whole thing, and I was having a press conference. And I came up with a line, which was, it's not cojones, it's cowardice. I have Elaine Shokus with me, who helped put the whole show together, but was my chief of staff, and was also the judge of whether something was appropriate to say. So I called her up and she said, yeah, go with it. So President Clinton thought it was the best line of the administration. The bottom line is I wore the blue bird when I was doing the press conference with the head down in honor of the fallen pilots. I had pins that, in fact, got me into trouble and pins that got me out of trouble. This is all in there. What happened was, at the 50th anniversary of NATO, which we celebrated at a summit in Washington, there is a very funny picture of President Clinton, Secretary of Defense Cohen, and I sitting on a sofa, and I don't know which one of us started the Hear No Evil, See No Evil monkeys, but it's a crazy picture. It appeared in Time magazine. So I was shopping somewhere, which I'm very good at, and I found 3 monkeys, and I decided to wear them when I was in Moscow for the summit in June of 2000. I so thought that the Russian policy on Chechnya was evil that I thought I'd wear the monkeys. And so we get there, and President Putin looks at President Clinton and says, we always notice what pins Secretary Albright is wearing. So why are you wearing those 3 monkeys? And I actually said, because of your Chechnya policy. And he got furious at me and said, you shouldn't be talking to the Chechens, they're terrorists, etc. And President Clinton gave me a look like, you idiot, you just screwed up the summit. So that's when they got me into trouble. Now, they actually did get me out of trouble. Not only did I invent the idea of using pins as diplomatic symbols, but I also single-handedly invented the art of diplomatic kissing. You can't imagine Secretary Kissinger or Secretary Baker going into a country and having a big embrace, but that was what I did, and it was very confusing because the Latins, some kiss on the right cheek and some on the left cheek, and the French kissed twice and the Dutch 3 times. And then there was Yasser Arafat, just the thought, right? So I arrived in South Korea, and there was a big embrace and everything, and we had good meetings, and I left, and all of a sudden I got a phone call when I got back to Washington from a journalist saying, don't you think the South Korean foreign minister should be forced to resign because of what he said about you? And I said, well, what did he say? He said, well, it's outrageous. He really should resign. I said, well, what did he say? He said, well, I'd really love it when Secretary Albright comes. We're about the same age, and I'm this tired old man, and she's full of vim and vigor, and besides, when I embrace her, she has very firm breasts. So, what do you have to say to that? And I said, well, I have to have something to put those pins on. So, thank you all very much for being here.
Tell you. Oh, okay.